Hey friends, it's Timbot here at the TTL Makerspace. Welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about the setup of the software FreeCAD, which is a freely available open source CAD modeling program with parametric abilities built in. And it's available for every major operating system. And as we jump into our CNC course, you're probably going to want to give it an install on your computer. Now, I would suggest that you look through the documentation, which you can find here on the FreeCAD wiki, for specific instructions on installing the software for your operating system. So for example, looking at the instructions for Mac OS here, you can see there's a couple of specific steps that you're going to need to take after you do the download. For example, it mentions that you need to mount the disk image and then drag it to the application folder in order for it to have the permissions to execute. On top of that, you're going to need to deal with this message that'll come up that, FreeCAD is from an unidentified developer. Now, if you download FreeCAD from the official sources, it's going to be very safe. You're not going to have any problem with that. But your operating system is going to ask you, and I believe it's going to ask you each time you open it if it's safe to open it. So you're going to have to acknowledge and click on that. Now, I am on a Linux system, which means that all I have to do is download an app image file. So right here, I've got an app image, and as you can see from the title, this is from the weekly builds. Weekly builds allow me to get latest updates and try out, bug fixes and feature updates and changes and so forth that the developers are working on. The project is in active development. And an app image is a fully self-contained file. And to run that on my Linux system after I've downloaded it, the first step in setup is to basically right-click it, go to the properties, click on the permissions, and just check off where it says, allow executing this file as a program. So this is the, kind of the Linux version of doing that security check, the same as that you would have on Mac OS. Now, I've already checked that off. And so I'm able to just double click and launch the software. So once you've got your installation up and running, there's a few steps I want to go through that we'll use to tweak the interface a little bit, specifically for working with CNC. We're going to be going in depth on CNC milling, and so we're going to tune our environment with a few setup steps that will allow you to work a little bit more efficiently and avoid some of the pitfalls that you could run into that could happen if you haven't done this setup step. So shall we get started? All right, I'm going to launch the software, and you're going to see that I've got my environment already customized a little bit. When you first launch FreeCAD, you're going to see the light theme. Well, you can see one obvious change I've made is that I've switched it to the dark theme here. So the first thing that I want to point out to you, especially if you're using computers in the makerspace, other people might be on there and putting some of their preferences on, is that there is actually a way to do a reset of all the settings and preferences, and it's useful to know about that. If I click up here and I go to Edit, click on Preferences, at the bottom of the General tab here, you're going to find a button that says Reset. And I'm going to do that, and that is basically going to reset everything back to the defaults and undo any of the preference changes that I've made so we can walk through it. Now that's helpful to know about because from time to time you might need to reset a few of your preferences, and the best way to do it is through this reset button right here. So I'm going to click that reset. It's going to ask if I'm sure. I'll click the yes. And I'm going to need to restart FreeCAD for this to kick in. So let's do it. And you're going to see that my software looks a little different now. So we're relaunching FreeCAD. And one of the things you're going to notice right away is that my theme colors have been reset. And it's, back to the, I would say, maybe a little bit bland or a little bit dated looking theme here. So let's see how we can tweak the preferences on here. Now, the theme is one thing that we're going to update, but there's a couple of other pretty important changes that we're going to want to set specifically for CNC milling. So let's go into the edit and go back into those preferences that we're talking about. And the first thing that I'll point out is that right down here, you have an option under Style Sheet. If I click that drop down, you can see that there's all kinds of different themes that you can make use of. Now, the one I typically use is the Pro Dark, but this is important to know about because if you have a little bit of trouble distinguishing things, small details on the color scheme that is turned on by default, you might want to try one of these other color schemes and be a little easier on the eyes. I'm going to quickly switch to the Pro Dark, and I'm going to hit the Apply right here. The second option that I'll point out from here is the size of the toolbar icons. I've got these set to medium. Just because it's a little easier to see when I'm presenting, and I could even go larger. You could go down to small little icons. If you're on a very small screen, you might want to change the size of your toolbar icons just to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on there. Now, you can tweak the aesthetics of the thing as much as you want, but one of the changes that you're going to need to make specifically for CNC work, at the top here, there's a bunch of other options, and there's actually a little, right-hand clicker here that will let you scroll further over. And I'm going to go right to the end where we find the Units tab. I'm going to click on that Units tab, and under Unit System, I'm going to click this drop down to enable Metric, Small Parts, and CNC. Now, if you do not set this unit preference, later on when you start making your machining paths, it's going to complain at you one time that this is not set. So let's go ahead and set it right now, and we'll be ready for CNC machining. And we'll click on Apply for that one. Click the OK. And now, we've got the unit set, and that's probably the most basic change that we need to make. Next up, we're going to tell it where to find the tool bits that we're going to use in the path workbench, where we do all of our machining paths. Okay, now before we go any further, why do we need to set our tool bit location? Well, let me show you what we're going to be talking about, and this will make more sense when we get into actually using the path workbench. But right here I've got a folder called Tools, and if I click inside of it, this is the folder structure that the software expects to store information about the tool bits we're going to be using with our CNC machine. And you can see you've got a library folder, a shape folder, and a bit folder. Now, I like to take this tools folder and put it in a location that I can easily back up. So for me, I just put it inside my documents, right alongside my FreeCAD installation here. But there's going to be some kind of a safe, easily accessible location on your operating system where you're going to make a folder and put your tools inside of there. Now, you can copy these tools and you can move them between machines. It's as simple as just grabbing this folder, dropping it on a USB key, or sending it to yourself. And you could even grab the bits from the tool library and have this specific set that I'm using. You can make your own versions of it. The important point here is that the software, when you first install it and launch it, needs to know where that folder is. So I'm going to show you two different ways that you can set up your bits here. And this can be confusing if you don't know about it. So let's walk through it together here. So the first thing I have to do is make a new document. And the only reason I'm making that is so that I can switch from the Start Workbench over to the Path Workbench here. Now, if you had not set your units, it would start complaining at you right now. But we did that in the previous step. So what I want to do is click on the Path drop down, And specifically, I'm looking for the Toolbit Library Editor. Now, the first time that you launch this inside of the Path Workbench, it's going to prompt you if it does not know where your toolbits are. So I'm going to click on that. And as predicted, it's going to say, the working directory of your toolbits isn't set. Would you like to do that? You definitely want to click on yes for that. Okay, so it's going to take us to a file locator and says, choose a location for your toolbits. So there's two ways that this can go. The first is where you point it at a folder where you've already got your tool bits, right? And as soon as you do that, it's going to recognize, you've got the libraries, you've got the bits, and, it'll just take those and make use of them. Now, if you point it at a folder that doesn't have any tools in it, it is going to walk you through a couple of prompts that will allow you to generate all the default tools for FreeCAD. So let me show you both of them. So first off, I'm going to go to my tools folder here. So I'm going to jump into my software folder, go into my FreeCAD folder, and what you want is you want to select the folder that contains the other three subfolders, right? So I'm not going to go inside tools here. It's not looking for me to select one of these. It's looking for me to select the overall folder that all three of those subfolders are inside of. So I'm going to select my tools folder. I'll hit the choose, and you can see that it has looked inside of there and found all of my bits. So I'm up and running and I'm all good. And if I close this out now, I can click on Path again, and if I enable my toolbit dock, there's all my tools ready to go. Now, you may not have a folder with tools in it already. Maybe it's your first time using the software. So I'm going to show you the second method, which will allow you to specify any directory and have the software, copy a nice default set of bits into there for you. And those are going to basically give you the basis of creating any tools that you want to work with. So let's take a look at how that works. To do it, I'm going to go ahead and reset my preferences again, and then we'll pick it up from the point where we're first launching the software. Okay, I'm back to the earlier step. I've reset my preferences, and then I set my units, and here I am in the Path Workbench. And just like before, I'm going to click on the Path drop-down, go to the Toolbit Library Editor. I get the prompt. I'm going to say, yes, let's set up our tool bits. Now this time, I'm not going to select a folder where I've already got some bits, and we'll see how we can get it to generate some bits for us here. So I'm just going to go to my documents. I'll choose some location here. Yeah, I'll put it alongside my FreeCAD folder here. So I'm not going to select my tools instead. I'm just going to make a new little folder here, and I'll call this my tool test. There we go. And then I'm going to choose that empty folder here, and we see we'll get a little bit different prompt. In this case, it's saying, there's no bits inside of here. Would we like to make the subfolders? And we're just going to click on yes. It's going to ask, do we want to copy the example files into the bit directory? We'll say yes. Same thing for the library directory. We'll say yes. And you can see it's given us a nice set of 9 different bits. Now, this is a pretty good thing to do when you're first getting started here, because you're going to get basically every type of common bit. You're going to get an end mill, a drill, a ball end, a bull nose, a V-bit, a chamfer bit, even a slitting saw and a probe. These are not something you're going to use too often, but it's nice to have them there. Now, once you've got this basic set of bits, you're going to be able to customize these extensively and build out a specific bit set that you like to work with. You'll also be able to make multiple libraries. Now, where this is useful is, sometimes you might want to have a specific set of bits for a particular machine, like the Genmitsu style machines that we have in the shop. Maybe you want to have a second set of bits that you use for specific operations or specific materials. You're going to be able to make a pretty nice set of bits here. Now, you're not going to want to lose those once you've put some time and work into customizing your tools. And that's why I suggest that you go through the effort to select a location, maybe in your documents or some folder that you have access to, that you'll be able to copy that folder and back it up on the regular. So if you move to another machine, or if by some chance, you delete a bit, you'll be able to get those back again. So that is a pretty important step. And you're definitely going to want to do that in the initial setup of your software. Okay, we are definitely improving things here. Our next customization that we might want to look at doing is trimming down the number of workbenches that we have available. If you click on your workbench drop down here, you're going to see there's quite a lot in here, and it can be a little bewildering when you're first getting started. These are the official workbenches, and there's a ton more workbenches available that are community contributions. But when you're first getting started, it can be a little bit difficult trying to go up and down this list, finding the specific workbench that you want to work with. So what I'd suggest is removing a few of them that you're not likely to use when you first get started. You can always bring them back again, but let's just see if we can make this a little easier to look at. So the way to do it is to click on the Tools drop down and go to Customize right here. And then once you're inside here, you can click on the Workbenches tab right here. And this allows you to, remove workbenches from your active list. Now, you can always bring them back later, and removing them is pretty straightforward. So, for example, the arch workbench that we have right here, it's pretty specific for architectural purposes. You're not likely to need it, and we don't really use it in our CNC course, so let's get it out of there. To get it out of there, we're just going to click the little arrow that sends it to the left and puts it in the disabled workbenches. Now, we will keep draft. We won't need drawing. Right now, we don't need fasteners, although it is pretty cool. FEM will move over. Glider will move over. We'll keep image. We can remove inspection. I've got this community contribution, which is the KeyCAD setup. That's for designing circuit boards. I'm going to move that out for now. Mesh we use more so when we're doing 3D print. So if you're doing 3D print stuff, you might want to keep that one around. OpenSCAD we won't need for now. We will definitely keep part design and part and path. Those are our big, those are our heavy hitters for CNC stuff. We won't need points. We won't need ray tracing or reverse engineering, robot. Sheet metal we don't really need right now, although it is very cool. Sketcher we definitely want to keep. We're going to keep spreadsheet. We'll keep start. We don't really need surface right now for what we're doing. Won't need tech draw. Definitely won't need test framework, and certainly won't need web. And so we've trimmed down our workbenches to make an environment that is a little bit more tuned for doing CNC work. This looks good. We will close, and then we're going to need to restart the software because, as you can see, they're still all showing up in here. But if we just bounce out of here real quick, restart the software, the next time it launches, we'll see that the workbench drop-down is a lot cleaner, a lot simpler to look at and navigate. So if you click that drop-down, you can see you've got just the tools that you need. Beautiful. Of course, you should feel free to examine the other workbenches, but these are the main ones that we're going to use during the next 6 weeks as we get into CNC here. Okay, we're making good time here. For our next customization, we're going to address the somewhat crowded toolbar up top here. When you first start up FreeCAD, it is basically going to turn on all of the icons, And it can be a little overwhelming if you are first using the software. And the good news is that you're going to be able to clean this up quite a bit. To illustrate, let me jump over to the part design workbench here, one of the ones that you're going to definitely use the most. And you can see from my toolbar here that I'm not really able to see all of the icons. A lot of them are hidden away behind these collapsed menus here. Now you can hover anywhere that you see like these little handles right here, and you can grab those and you can reposition them, right? And then, you know, you'll be able to see all of them, but there's still just a lot to look at here. So what I would suggest is, you know, some of the icon sets that we have on here really just don't need to be here. So for example, these view icons take up quite a bit of space inside of our menus here. But if you'll notice right over here, you know, you have a little navigation cube that basically allows you to do the exact same thing, which is setting your view as these icons do. So these are really not that useful. And in fact, in some ways, you don't even need the cube because you've got keyboard shortcuts. Any number key that you press on your keyboard is going to snap you to a different view. So after using those a couple of times, you're going to find that you don't really need all of these icons taking up space and creating this little bit of visual clutter here. So it's very easy to update this. If you right-click anywhere inside of your toolbar view, you can simply check or uncheck any of the views on here that you don't want to see. So I'm gonna remove some of this and trim down some of the clutter that we've got going on here. So I'm going to uncheck the report view. I'm going to unclick the selection view. Don't really need it. We're going to definitely keep the combo view, but we can get rid of file because we've got we have a full file drop down right here. We don't really need an icon for that. We're going to keep workbench for sure. I'm going to get rid of view. So that's all those blue icons that we were talking about. Structure, when you're first getting started, you're not really going to use structure very much. You can probably remove that for now. And then let's see here. Part design helper, you want to keep. Part design modeling, we want to keep. Measure, you don't really need too much. We can remove that as well. And now you see we've got a nice trim little set of icons here. In fact, it's small enough that I can fit it into a single row and, you know, create more space in my viewport to work with here. So those changes are going to apply across all of the workbenches. And already you can see that your interface is getting a lot simpler to look at. All right, now this last mod that we're going to look at, now that we've cleaned up our interface, we've got our units set, we've got a location for our tool bits, this last set of mods are basically to turn on some experimental features in the software. Now, I use these regularly and I find them pretty solid to work with, but in most cases you don't really need them. But we're going to have some fun with them in the course, and they enable us to do some things like, more organic type of modeling and milling using tools like 3D Surface. So if I jump over to my path workbench right now, you'll see that the tools I have, are the standard ones. But I only have one tool right here for, doing 3D pockets. Now there's another set of tools that can allow you to do much more elaborate 3D milling. But they're not obvious and they're not turned on by default in the software. So we're going to go ahead and turn them on now. So in the documentation for FreeCAD, they do spell this out pretty well. And they mention that you're going to go to the parameter editor, which is under Tools and Edit Parameters. So this is basically, configuration that is stored in the configuration directory of FreeCAD, and any property in there can be edited. They give you like a little user interface to be able to do that. So to do it, we're going to jump into our FreeCAD, and we're going to go to Tools, and your first option is Edit Parameters. All right. Now you're going to see quite a lot of folders in here. And the one that we're looking for is under the base app, we're going to look for the Preferences subfolder. Inside Preferences, you're going to find the Mod folder, and you're going to click on Path. Right? Once you're in there, you're going to be able to right-click over here and create a new Boolean item. So it's asking for the name, and it's a very specific name that we have to use here. If we jump back to the documentation, you will see that that name is Enable Advanced OCL Features. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that name, and we're going to set it to true. So back in FreeCAD, I'm going to plug in that name. There we go. Hit the OK, and we're going to set it to true. Hit the OK on that one. And there's one more that we can make use of. If you look back in the documentation, we've also got Enable Experimental Features. I'm going to copy that one. Right over here, we're going to add a new Boolean item. Paste that name in, hit the OK, and set that one to true as well. Hit the OK right there. And now we're ready to save those changes to our disk, just like that. Save it to disk, close it out. Now you will have to restart the software for that to kick in. So I'm going to exit out of my FreeCAD, relaunch it. And we'll do a quick little check to see if those experimental features are enabled. All right, let's just make a new document real quick. We're going to go over to our Path Workbench. And now you'll notice that there's actually a little drop down on that 3D Pocket tool. So this tells us, that we do have the additional features enabled, and we're going to be making those. We're going to make use of those by the time we get up around week 4 of the program. So if you want to have some fun with those, I recommend turning those on. But otherwise, you've now got a nice streamlined interface. You've got your bits set, you've got your units set, and you're pretty much ready to dive into modeling in FreeCAD. So I look forward to working with you. If you had any snags or you got a question, let me know. And yeah, let's jump in and have some fun.